Hello and thank you for supporting Fabula. I am Matteo, co-author of Fabula, and I'm going to give you a brief presentation that will help you to understand the product and that will help you to use it in a super effective way. So this is the same presentation that I gave to several writers and screenwriters who are now happy users of Fabula. And it's the same presentation that I gave to professionals in DreamWorks and Paramount when I was promoting Fabula in LA. Fabula is a tool that is going to help you with organizing and creating an effective story. It's good for writers, screenwriters, for editors. We now have a lot of happy users all over the world. Together with the other co-author, Andrea Binasco, we decided to create a tool that is a mix of theories from narratology and visual thinking, so that you can visually organize your story, and that's much more useful and easy than organizing a manuscript. Fabula is super easy to use. Each card is like a box to fill. It's going to give you the right question, and you can just fill it using a post-it below. So it's exactly how you see on the back on my wall. These cards, you can place them wherever you want. You can place them on tables, on floors, or you can use them on the wall. That's what we suggest. So let's start with how Fabula works. We have 3 sets of cards inside: the blue cards, the orange cards, and the black cards. The blue cards are assets, so they're going to give you the right questions for what are your ingredients. These cards, they don't have a precise order. You can use them freely, and you can place them in a cloud. You're going to decide who are your heroes, so the heroes of your stories, the allies, the enemies. So the enemies, they can also not be characters, but they can be like a sort of abstract enemies. For example, in the Catcher in the Rye, from Salinger, the enemy is the fear of growing up. So it's not an enemy like the Agent Smith in The Matrix. Then you have a card for the narrator. So you're going to decide who is your narrator, if he has its own story. For example, in The Never-Ending Story, the narrator has its own story. Otherwise, if you're writing fiction, you're going to think about the voice of the narrator. Then you have 2 cards for thinking about the subplots. So if you have second stories that you are going to use during the plot. Then a card for concept and theme. This is a very controversial card. We made a lot of tests with users, and some writers, they love these cards. Some other writers, they don't like the fact of starting with a concept in mind. So there are different schools of thinking. Some writers, they like to start with a concept, with a general idea, and to communicate it during the story. Some other writers, they just like to set the characters and put them in place and then see where they're gonna lead them. Then you have the form. So this card is about which kind of form, if you're using an experimental form, for example, if you think about something like Pulp Fiction, that's a sort of an experimental way of showing a story, or Memento. If you're writing fiction, maybe you want to use an experimental way of writing. Then this is the moment where you can think it about aloud. We have the mood board. So around this card, you are going to place pictures, images, whatever you think that is going to give you the mood. So this is super helpful if you're writing a script, because then you are going to use it for the treatment. So you already have the mood board of your story. Then we have the space. Where is going to be your story? How is the space of the story? A lot of writers, they love to place a map to check the space of the story, the real space. So for example, if I'm writing a book about Amsterdam, I may want to use a map of Amsterdam on my wall to do a little bit of fact checking. So I'm gonna see if my character is running from one place to another, if it's possible in 10 minutes or not. And I'm gonna check the name of the streets. Then we have a card for magical objects. These objects that are gonna have a specific and important meaning in the story. If we think about the baseball ball in Underworld from Don DeLillo, that's the case, for example, or the handkerchief in Othello. These are objects that are going to have a specific meaning and a function. When we worked with these blue cards, we have the ingredients. It's a sort of a brainstorming. We know a little bit about our story. We know which are the enemies, who are the heroes, the allies. We know some of it. Then we can use the orange cards for the story development. We're going to use these cards to develop the story of all the characters, at least the main one. These cards are based on the hero's journey. It's an archetypical structure that was studied by Joseph Campbell first, and then from Vogler, and it was adapted for screenwriting. So what we did, we studied it, and we tried to make it simple for all kind of users. So both for fiction writing, for screenwriting, and especially we discovered during some tests with the users that the original structure, it was a little bit difficult to understand and too complex. So we made it much simpler and much more easy to use. You have to place them in a specific order. They are numbered, so you have the small number on the corner. So we start with the ordinary world. This is the first moment when the hero is at the beginning of its story. Nothing happens. It's the still moment at the beginning. In the Matrix, Neo is a shitty hacker and his life is not so good. So he's looking for something. That's his ordinary world. Then we always have a call to action. The call to action is when the story of the hero moves. In the Matrix is the moment we have Follow the White Rabbit. It's the same call to action from Alice in Wonderland. Then we usually have an anxiety of the call. So the hero doesn't want to be the hero. He is not willing to be the hero. He's scared. And if you imagine if in this moment somebody arrives at your door saying, okay, let's go save the world, you are the one. That's very unlikely that you want to go. It's more like, oh my God, I'm not the hero. This is that moment. It's the moment when Neo is trying to climb the roof and he can't. So at that moment he's taken by the agents. It's the same that happens to Luke Skywalker when Obi-Wan is telling him, you are a Jedi, and he's like, no, my God, I want to stay on this planet just looking after ships. Then you have the mentor as aid. So there is a mentor helping the hero. Most of the time the mentor is a former hero in a former story. In the case of the Matrix, it's Morpheus. Morpheus is telling Neo that he is the one and that he has to choose. This is the moment when Neo is choosing between the red pill and the blue pill. Then we have the threshold. The hero is going in the new world. There is a border, a physical border most of the time. But in The Catcher in the Rye, Holden is taking the train. So he's on the train, and with the train he's going to the city, the new world in his story. In the case of the Matrix, Neo is going out of the Matrix. Then you have the new world. The hero is discovering the new world. In the case of the Matrix, he's knowing everything and he's learning about his enemies, his allies. He meets Trinity and he's starting to fall in love. He understands that the agents are bad. This is the moment when the hero is learning about whatever is new. Usually it comes with trials. The hero has to face some trials to become the hero. In the case of the Matrix, he is learning how to do Kung Fu, how to jump. In the case of Avatar, it's the same. He's learning to be a soldier. And he's learning everything about this new way of living. When we think about a love comedy, the hero is trying to ask her out, then they have the first date, and so on. These trials, they can be also negative. I mean, the hero's journey is not always positive, and it's not always about adventure. So if we think about the story of an addicted junkie, we can think about the story of a person who fails each trial. It's the same that happens in The Catcher in the Rye, because the main character constantly fail. He's trying to go with a prostitute, but he's punched in the belly. He's trying to go out with some girls, but he fails. It's always going down and down. Then we have the fulfillment. The fulfillment is the moment when the hero is the hero. This is like the sort of the outcome of the last trial. In the Matrix, it's a negative fulfillment. He goes to the Oracle, and the Oracle tells him, "You are not the one." That's helpful for him, for his development, because knowing he's not the one, he can choose. In Avatar, what happens is that he manages to become a soldier. Then we usually have the Nightfall. The Nightfall is a moment of crisis. So it's a sort of a second call to action. The enemy that was silent all the time suddenly appears again. In the Matrix is when they get Morpheus. It's also the moment when Neo is facing the worst moment and he's like, what should I do? Okay, I can save him. This is the moment. Then we have the central trial. The central trial is the face-off with the enemy. In the case of the Matrix is when they get Morpheus back. They are going against the agents. Then we usually have an outcome. It can be a negative outcome or a positive outcome. In the case of the Matrix, it's a positive outcome, of course, because Neo gets Morpheus back, he understands he's the one, everything is super good. In the case of a movie like The Reign of Fire, this outcome is extremely negative, because they are going against the big dragon and they fail. It's the same case with How to Train Your Dragon, because his central trial is about showing his father that, and all the village, that there is a new way of living, to live amongst dragons, but he fails. His dragon, Toothless, is taken, and his father is like, I don't recognize you as my son. Pretty bad. If the movie stops at the outcome, okay, if the movies or the story of the book stops here, you will have that feeling that you may have experienced watching Jurassic Park 3. They ran away from all the dinosaurs, and there is a super runaway, and then they arrive to the beach, and then there are the ships of the Allies, and okay, ending titles. And you have that feeling like it's already done. So usually we have a relapse. So the relapse is already in the Odyssey. When Ulysses comes home, after all the trials, after all the things he went through, he arrives at home and he discovers his home is taken from other enemies. He has to defeat also them, to get back his wife and all. This is the moment where usually we have the resurrection. The resurrection is the moment when the hero, metaphorically speaking, he is dying. Sometimes he's also dying or almost dying, and then he resurrects. Resurrecting, it means that he's finally showing that he learned something on his path. In the case of the Matrix, actually Neo dies and then he resurrects. It's the same in the story of Jesus Christ, if you think about it. The relapse, so going back a little bit, in the Matrix is when Neo has to face the Agent Smith alone. They managed to get back Morpheus, they are at the phones, Morpheus goes back, Trinity goes back, but then there's something happening. And that's when you have the climax going. Then at the end of the structure, we have the conclusion. The hero is either in the new world and he stays there, or he goes back in the old world, changed. This is a new moment in which everything is still again. Once you know this structure and you can use it, that's when you know also how to break the rules. You learn the rules to break them. So for example, what happens if we take the call to action and we place it at the end of the story, so after the conclusion? It happens a lot of time in the Marvel movies. At the end of the movie, you see like something that is gonna suggest you what's gonna happen next. And what if we erase the call to action? A story without call to action. That's Waiting for Godot, for example. We can decide to do whatever we want with this structure. We can have 2 sets of trials. We could have several relapses. We can have 2 central trials. That's completely up to you. Again, these are just rules that are very common in our culture and that we can use to write something that is very, very effective, but we can also use them to create something completely new. If we have just one character and the time of the story is completely linear, then we can just use these cards because we can just attach them as behind, and then we have one row with post-its, and that's all for our character. But what happens when we have several characters, a movie like Departed, when we have 2 main characters, or when we want to play with the time of the story, or a movie like Memento, or a thriller where you have the story of how everything went, so there is the story of the killer, but then what we tell the audience is something completely different from the eyes of the detective. Here's what happens. We developed a way to manage, to develop the story of several characters. So you have on one row all the steps of your story, and then you are gonna have the first hero, okay, you're gonna have the first hero on the first row. So you're gonna develop here with post-its the story of your first hero. Then you are gonna add another card that is the second hero below. The second row is for the second hero, and that's the same for the narrator, or if he has its own story, or for the third hero, the fourth hero, and if we are talking about Game of Thrones, of course you're gonna need a huge wall. This way you are gonna have the possibility of developing the story of several characters, one story per row. So you're gonna have the first row for the first hero, the second, okay, and so on. Then, and this is extremely important because this is the theory of narratology, we have the orange cards for the time of the story and the black cards that are the last set for the editing, that is the time of the discourse, how the story happens and how the story is told. So here you have all the events from the eyes of the characters. Here you're gonna have all the events from the eyes of the audience. So this is a very important to understand because this is a basic theory, but it's super important. Here you're gonna develop all the scenes of the stories of each characters. You're gonna develop the story of Memento from the beginning, how the events happen. So the story for the guy that is living the story. Then you are gonna use the black cards to organize all the events for who's gonna see them. So for the reader, for the audience. When you will have your canvas with all the steps here, and then you're gonna have the first character, then the second one. Okay. This column, it doesn't synchronize the time. The first hero here with a post-it, let's just imagine it. It's gonna be the call to action of the first hero, but not necessarily it happens at the same time of the call to action of the second hero. So that's the important thing to understand. The call to actions, they can happen in different moments. You will have to organize when to show those steps. And that's when we arrive to the editing. It's called the editing because it's like we shot all the scenes with the orange cards, and then we have to edit them. We have to prepare them for the audience. The editing is following the 3-act structure. It's a super simple structure to build all the emotions for the audience. So we're gonna have the prologue. It's always a numbered structure. So 1, 2, 3, okay. We're gonna have the prologue, and the prologue is about what we are gonna tell the audience before the real story begins. Then we have the setup, and the setup is the same. It's what we are going to show the audience in order to make it understand the story. And it's also the beginning of Act 1. Then we have the catalyst. The catalyst, it's a sort of a call to action perceived by the audience. The catalyst, it could be the call to action of the first hero, but not of the second. What do we want the audience to feel as the moment, as the action, as the scene that moves the story? So this is, again, all about the audience. Then we are going to have the rising action. The rising action is the beginning of Act 2. Then super easy, because we have the midpoint, very classical. Then the crisis and the climax. We have the moment of maximum down and then the moment of maximum up. Okay. And then we have the beginning of Act 3, that is the solution. Arriving to the end, we have the epilogue. Maybe, it's not necessary. So we are using 2 levels here, because we have, again, a canvas with these cards, and then we have 2 levels. On one row, on the first row, we have the order of the events, and on the second row, we have the conflicts evolution. Okay. On this row, we are gonna take the scenes that we developed with the orange cards, and we are gonna order them according to the structure. And with this one is a sort of a bonus card. This one is for emphasizing the conflicts evolution. If we think that we want to show at some point that we have a conflict between father and son that is finishing, we can use this card. For ordering the events, now you can understand why we used this kind of codes. Call to action is CTA, conclusion is C, resurrection is RE. You're not gonna move the post-its and you're not gonna write the post-its again. This is for convenience. So you're gonna write the post-its for the orange cards. And then you can make a sort of a pointer, because you can just write a post-it for the black cards with R1, the relapse of the first hero, or CTA2, the call to action of the second hero. With these ones, you can basically build any kind of story. We tried breaking down a lot of movies, books, also TV series, and it's possible to organize everything visually, also with the most complex stories. So that's all. The presentation is over. Thanks for watching. We're going to send you more videos in the future of how we used Fabula to analyze different stories. Thanks again, and see you next time.